Story 1. Working as a physical therapist in a hospital, I can tell you 90% of the chronic patients are not getting enough treatment or medical resources. Story 2. After nearly 30 years in healthcare, I can say the insurance you choose is more important than the doctor you choose. Your insurance carrier will dictate your care far more than your physician will. They decide what tests you receive, when you can have them done if authorization is required, whether a doctor-recommended surgery is medically necessary, and when you must leave the hospital if you are admitted. If they believe you no longer meet medical criteria for inpatient care, you will be discharged regardless of what your doctor thinks or wants for you. Story 3. I see several issues. Public education and healthcare are on the brink of collapse. People being priced out of housing are also a major issue. Story 4. Healthcare is frightening. Staff shortages are reducing access to many services. Story 5. The collapse of public education is coming faster than we think. Story 6. Generative artificial intelligence will call into question the legitimacy of every piece of digitally consumed content. In some cases, it already has. Story 7. These are the small signs of the breakdown of the social contract. Road rage, a lack of courtesy, and immediate escalation over the smallest inconveniences. People do not care as much, and it is becoming a social contagion. Why would an individual act in the interest of everyone else when one cannot expect others to do the same? Story 8. Large sea trawlers are scooping up sand and marine life and depositing them on artificial beaches, such as those in Dubai. The marine organisms are placed where they do not belong and will either die or become an infestation. Story 9. The fact that we are losing topsoil and bee colonies are collapsing. Story 10. We will face a critical shortage of service and essential workers. Story 11. Florida and other parts of the country that are vulnerable to hurricanes have large areas that are becoming uninsurable for homeowners insurance. Story 12. In my family, 4 people were diagnosed with cancer within a 30-year period. 2 had small cell lung cancer and 2 had thyroid cancer. The oncologist said the thyroid cancer was not hereditary, and the 2 who had it are siblings. Both cancers can be caused by long-term exposure to radon in the home. 3 of them lived in the same house, and the 4th visited frequently and also lived in the same town. I have told my immediate family, and I seem to be the only one who wants the houses tested. None of them know when the homes were last tested. My mother is one of the thyroid cancer patients, and I spent a lot of time in that house as a child. Story 13. Many graduating high school seniors in public schools are practically illiterate. Story 14. The Department of Defense is blaming American veterans for underwhelming enlistment numbers. It claims that veterans speaking out about negative experiences in the military are contributing to low recruitment. Please educate yourselves about rape and sexual assault statistics across all branches of the armed forces and share that information. Story 15. Immigrant students in Ireland for whom English is a second language have better spelling, literacy, and vocabulary than native English-speaking Irish students. Few people in my year group can spell properly. This is appalling because there has never been a time in history when information has been so widely available online. The next generation in Ireland often does not know the difference between the words were and we are, or between the words there and there. Story 16. Very soon it will be impossible for the average person to look at what they think is a news report from a reputable outlet and tell whether the report, including video, photos, and accompanying media, is a complete fabrication. Not even the outlet that published it will necessarily know. They may be as surprised as anyone. The only hope is technology like what Intel and others are developing, which uses artificial intelligence to detect whether something has been faked. But then your judgment about what is true depends on software written by private companies that you must trust because you have no other option. You can no longer trust your own eyes and ears, the last senses you could rely on. They were not taken from you by request. It just happened. Story 17. The Pentagon is missing over $2 trillion after its 6th consecutive failed audit. Our government is full of corrupt officials, and no one talks about it. What I mean is that there is a good chance the money is miscounted or unaccounted for because they do not want it to be known. They do not want us to know what their budget is used for. Thanks for the likes. And thanks for keeping the discussion civil. For the greater good. Story 18. There is a loneliness epidemic that has already taken root and is getting worse. Romantic and platonic relationships are at an all-time low, and forming new relationships seems more difficult than ever. This is likely to cause more mental health problems and earlier onset of physical health problems. Story 19. The increase in anxiety-inducing posts on the internet. Laughing out loud. Story 20. Phone addiction is real and extremely common. I do not mean that phones are bad. Many people can easily spend 8 hours a day on their phones without realizing it. Story 21. As a therapist, I am observing some patterns. The poorest clients are feeling the squeeze the most, as usual, but they are not alone. I have daily conversations with people about feelings of shame, guilt, and worry around benefit loss and cuts, credit card debt, housing, and food prices. The high food prices are especially stressful. Trying to get a new patient appointment with our largest healthcare provider in town is not going to happen for most people until mid-March. Seeing a specialist is averaging more than 4 months out. There is an overall sense of unease and dread that permeates the majority of my clients' concerns. Fear of fascism, loss of rights, the possibility of a civil war, anxiety about the upcoming election, and the major issue of global warming. With the current wars now colliding with all that unprocessed existential dread, and with coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, as a contributing factor, the situation feels very dark. Story 22. It doesn't really snow here anymore. We used to get at least a few inches 2 or 3 times per winter. It has been over 50 degrees for the last 2 weeks. An honorary mention. There seem to be fewer insects each spring and summer. We used to go outside and see many bees, butterflies, beetles, and mosquitoes. Now it is barely a fraction of that number. Story 23. Kids can't read, much less comprehend basic concepts of literature. Story 24. Since the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic, children are using screens earlier and for longer periods, and this is negatively affecting their ability to focus and interact with others. Story 25. There is a consensus that headlights nowadays are too bright, but no one is taking responsibility. Your headlights are too bright. Please fix them. Story 26. Nobody cares about the subject matter of their jobs, myself included. That means almost nobody is passionate about what they do. I work in tech and I am bored. Everyone I know is bored. Story 27. I live in a high-elevation area of Wyoming, and we have no snow at all. It was almost 60 degrees here a couple of days ago. Story 28. There are about 100 deer in my backyard, standing and staring at me. Story 29. My sister told me her astigmatism is so bad that she can barely see well enough to drive at night. My mother cannot see well and walks bent over, yet she continues to drive. My father has Alzheimer's disease, and my mother lets him drive even though he pulls out in front of people. There are very dangerous people driving on the roads. It is best to assume they are the worst and practice defensive driving. Story 30. The 99% own less each day, and everyone seems to be okay with never being able to own anything and living life on loans. Story 31. Who the fuck would want to live longer in this shitstorm? I am not depressed or suicidal, but I do not want to see how much further we can fall. Society is failing. We are all in free fall, but our online lives are doing just fine. Story 32. Lack of third places for people to gather and connect. Declines in in-person community connections due to technology have led to deep loneliness and a lack of sexual relationships among young people. This will be a serious problem when these isolated young people become adults. Story 33. There is an alarming lack of willingness to show compassion toward those who are less fortunate or have disabilities. Many people try to put others down, and society is breaking down as a result. Story 34. Going from several feet of snow each winter to rain. No more 9 months of harsh winter and 3 months of poor skiing. Story 35. At some point, we as a nation must address the rising suicide rates and the mass shootings involving people with mental illness and work to prevent them. Story 36. The woods are silent. There are no animals. Very young children, around 3 years old, sit at the table during a meal, hypnotized by their tablets. Story 37. An entire generation, maybe two, is being stripped of the ability to build generational wealth because housing is too expensive across the West. We are also being drained as computers and algorithms have learned how to extract every last nickel and dime without taking so much that people revolt. Jobs that were said to be high demand or well-paid often are not. Many blue-collar jobs that once supported a family and allowed buying a house now barely cover rent. It feels like everything is less merit-based and more class-based, which was what America was supposed to be trying to escape by leaving Europe. I know Reddit will say America has always been class-based, and that is true of every society to some degree, but it has gotten much worse recently. The common thread through every revolution in human history is young men feeling like they have no future. Story 38. The 2024 election's likelihood of being a horrific event is absolutely frightening. Story 39. Medical advances over the last 30 years, including statins, improved blood pressure medications, advanced medical imaging, artificial joints, colonoscopies, coronary surgery techniques, and other technologies, may cause tens of millions of people's bodies to outlast their minds. There could be an epidemic of dementia unless we develop better brain health. Story 40. Over the past year, we have had nearly non-stop rain. I work in a pet store, and this year goldfish and tadpoles are in short supply because last year's spawning season was disrupted by the weather. I have seen weather trends become more extreme each year, but this is the first time I have seen it affect something people take for granted. If these extremes continue worldwide, we can expect species to begin dying out on a mass scale within our lifetime. Story 41. I am seeing a growing lack of grace from people. As we spend more time on the internet, it has become easier to simply cast people aside when they do something wrong or offend someone. There is no humanity in that, and I find it worrisome. A mob mentality is forming. Story 42. This spring, my husband and I took a mini road trip from the San Francisco North Bay to Fresno for a comic convention and saw hardly any bug splatter in the California Central Valley during a huge super bloom. Fuck. Story 43. There is no safety net for elderly people in the United States, and homeownership, which many sell to pay for nursing home care, is at an all-time low. Story 44. This may be weird, but I've noticed more and more people driving around in cars with only one working headlight at night. I have zero statistics backing this up, but I strongly theorize that people not replacing their lights like they used to is a sign not of laziness, as older people complain, but of the rapidly declining financial situation in my area of the United States. People can't even afford their own headlights anymore, or are too exhausted from nonstop work and little or no time off to do something so menial. If this observation is accurate, it feels ominous. I know people have been warning about this for years, but I feel like a huge financial collapse is coming, and I have no idea how 80% of the nation will survive. Another observation specific to where I live is the dangerous way people are driving. This week alone, I can't count how many times I've been minding my business, staying in my lane, and nearly been sideswiped or wrecked by someone who, upon safely passing them, I could see was staring at their phone instead of the road. Almost every near miss I've had was with someone texting while driving, and none of them seemed to realize what they had done. I've had people swerve into my oncoming lane on two-lane roads. I've had others race past stop signs, cut me off, and slam on the brakes in front of me. I've seen people blow through stoplights 3 times today alone on my way to and from work when I had the right-of-way. Thank God I was paying attention. Semi-trailer trucks have been driving like they are Toyota Corollas instead of 10-ton hunks of deadly metal. On the evening of December 22nd, while driving to the store, we were at a strange intersection near our house with 2 lanes that both go the same direction. There are large red wrong way signs by the road for anyone coming from the other direction, but a Dodge Dart ran a light and drove up the wrong side of the road. It nearly took off our front bumper, but my dad, who I was riding with, managed to swerve and avoid it while blaring the horn. Story 45. Children are being taught to accept what they are told without practicing critical thinking. As a result, they often speak nonsensically and, when asked to explain, are unable to justify their beliefs. This has been happening for some time. Story 46. Fentanyl overdoses are increasing, and there is no clear plan to stop them. Story 47. I am 22, And every older member of Generation Z I know is extremely pessimistic about the future, both their own and the world's. They are apathetic toward the world, and I worry this will lead to harmful outcomes. A generation of unmotivated young people is not good for humanity. We need hopeful problem solvers. Story 48. It's probably because I spend too much time here, but so many adults can't control their temper, have meltdowns like big babies, and say the most vile things to others. There is no respect, decency, or dignity. They just treat people terribly. Anger seems to be the first reaction. Everyone is losing their composure these days. Story 49. Christmas is next week. Minnesota is 45 degrees and has not accumulated any snow. People are enjoying the weather, but in my opinion, this cannot be good. Story 50. The rich are getting richer while the middle and lower classes grow poorer. Rent is skyrocketing while salaries remain stagnant, and many people are exploited for their time and skills. Serious changes are needed in economic and labor systems. Story 51. The worst effects of the coronavirus disease 2019 era have not yet fully reverberated. Long-term effects persist. Loneliness is widespread. Our economic system is failing the majority. Trust in many institutions has weakened. Story 52. Old trade skills will disappear in the next 50 years. Artisans who can build houses, furniture, and other items using basic hand tools rather than power tools are retired or close to retirement. Those who still have those skills will be very rare. The modern belief that housing must be an investment is problematic. The idea that your house must make a profit when you sell it is a real burden. We should return to multigenerational estates. Keep the family home in the family and give your grandchildren a strong start in life. Story 53. Social media is trying to alter our minds with a lot of false information. Story 54. Eliminating institutions. No more psychiatric hospitals, orphanages, public housing, or homeless shelters. Instead, people are placed in the community without adequate support and simply given a check from a generic program. Many believe this is better, but is it? Is it better to have people living on the streets or isolated in their own homes without support? It is not clear. Story 55. Cruise ships are widely accepted as enormously harmful and destructive to sea life. Yet many people do not seem to care. They continue to take cruises and talk about how fun they are. They are floating ecological disasters, and that says nothing of how employees are treated aboard them. Why are they still popular? I am confused and hope someone has an answer. I thought that when Hassan Minhaj explained some of the problems on the show Patriot Act, people would be more skeptical, but it is strange that people will condemn gas-guzzling cars and still plan cruises. No one needs to go on a cruise. Story 56. The seasons where I am seem to be shifting. It used to start snowing in November. Now we're lucky if we get any snow in December or January. This last year we got a lot of snow, and we even had snow in June, which is crazy. It's now reaching summer temperatures well into July and staying hotter longer. Story 57. Almost everyone I know is on at least one prescription medication for a lifestyle-related condition or mental illness, but no one has the time or resources to address their problems in any meaningful way. They cannot afford to eat a healthy diet, take a break, or get enough sleep. They barely have time to speak with their children, much less to have a real social life or build deep connections in their community. Yet when people speak up, the usual response is to tell them to seek therapy or to prescribe a pill. No one is addressing the real issues underlying our problems. We just keep slapping bandages on bullet holes and pretending everything is fine. Story 58. There are fewer bugs around. I remember squashing them on the car windscreen as a kid. That hardly ever happens now. I rarely see butterflies or beetles anymore. Story 59. Mobile homes used to be affordable. If you do not own the land, the lot rent plus your mortgage can be as high as for a conventional house. There is little affordable housing left. It is available only to the wealthy. Story 60. Edit. Pesticides. I work in agriculture, usually with fruits and nuts, at the tail end doing inspections. There is a reason we are generally sick, and I believe mass-produced agriculture contributes more than the general population realizes. For one fruit commodity, I know too many inspectors who died of cancer. I think this is because we handle the fruit 12 hours a day for 4 months straight. That season in California supplies around 95% of the product in the United States. Also, anything mass-produced is not cruelty-free. I have seen many small animals harmed over the years. One season, a fruit shed could not get the barn cat out of the fumigation chamber, so they fumigated the cat with the fumigant. Fumigation is the process of using a toxic gas to kill pests in the product before processing, but it will kill anything else in the chamber too. That is sad. If you have access to land, take the opportunity to grow something for yourself. Story 61. The separation of church and state is being openly challenged, setting a terrifying precedent. Story 62. People are becoming more proficient at weaponizing mental health concepts, hiding behind them, and using them to deflect or perpetuate problems instead of using them as tools to do the work, take responsibility, grow, or become healthy. Examples include attachment theory, labels such as introvert or extrovert, and basic tools like I feel statements that are not used to take responsibility for one's feelings, but are used to make observations or passive-aggressive assertions. Story 63. The polar ice caps are shearing off chunk by chunk due to global warming. People even have it on film, yet nothing is done about it. Story 64. Change the tires on your car as seasons require. Always check how much tread is left and switch between winter and summer tires unless you use all-season tires. Paying attention can save your life if you drive frequently. Story 65. People care less about facts and empirical research, favoring fanatical claims that align with their personal beliefs. I thought you got past that point when you went to school, but apparently not. Story 66. Companies, mainly grocery stores, in the United States and Canada are able to exploit people because they are in the pockets of politicians. We are not dealing with inflation as much as people say we are. It is simply corporate greed. Story 67. People's mental health is declining. There is little distress tolerance. It is really worrying. Story 68. There is a looping cycle of blaming all the world's problems on the previous generation. Don't forget that boomers were once known as the flower children and coined the phrase, never trust anyone over 30. Boomers were cycle breakers too. They might not have gotten everything right, but they have their trauma as well. Sure, we have seen 2 recessions and a pandemic. But can you imagine an actual draft with friends pulled by the government halfway across the world to die? That left a lasting mark. The generational divide is a marketing ploy. Story 69. Emergency rooms are goddamn madhouses. We waited 8 hours in the waiting room when my husband, who has bladder cancer, was in renal failure. Nobody checked to see if he was in crisis. When we finally got a bed, it was in what I assume is the non-critical ward, surrounded by at least 3 people trying to obtain oxycodone and a couple more who were raving. There was also an elderly, impoverished man who angered a nurse. She was openly horrible to him. The next time we went, his renal tube had come out of his kidney, and they left him sitting in a chair while urine drained over him and onto the floor. When I complained, they handed me a cardboard vomit bowl, as if I could somehow capture urine draining from the hole in his back. Do not go to the emergency room if you can help it. My husband has worked hard all his life, and this is the healthcare he receives in return. Story 70. The removal of objective facts feels like everything is becoming subjective. Story 71. We overemphasize data collection and analysis. We treat every problem as if there is a numbers-based scientific solution. This is making our leaders less capable of critical and creative thought. We do not value subjective analysis, the ability to develop ethical or moral arguments, or the capacity for poetic and musical thought. Instead, it becomes number crunching by multibillion-dollar empires staffed by people who mistake mathematical skill for moral virtue. They have many statistics but not a single iota of philosophy or storytelling ability. The age of data is going to kill us all. Story 72. Over the last 30 years, I have dived in almost every warm ocean. The oceans are acidifying alarmingly fast, and the canary in the coal mine is the abundance of jellyfish you encounter when you dive. Story 73. I am a recruiter. Layoffs are getting worse. A friend who was laid off took another job with a $20,000 pay cut and was laid off from that job on Monday. I have been looking at jobs online. The majority pay $15 an hour to $50,000 a year and require being fully on site, but rent is $1,500 and groceries are $300 to $400 a month for one person. If your lease is ending soon and you can move back in with your parents or get a roommate, do it now. Story 74. We should focus on the massive class war we live in, not the culture war started by those above us. Most people are simply too distracted and preoccupied with hating each other instead of banding together. Almost all the issues mentioned here, such as climate change and the failures of healthcare and education, result from that class war and from no one rising up against it. Story 75. The world is changed. I feel it in the water and the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. Story 76. A lot of people I know have dental problems they cannot afford to fix. Story 77. There is a lack of willingness to prosecute and hold accountable the wealthiest and most powerful in our society. People are actively defrauding the public. They are doing it openly, and no one seems willing to hold them accountable or even discuss what is going on. Story 78. Helicopter parenting has led to young adults who are unable to make decisions for themselves. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.